Hello, and welcome to Health Matters. I'm Lloyd, Dean of Medicine at Stanford. We're pleased to bring this interactive and virtual event to you because at Stanford Medicine, nothing matters more than the health and well-being of our community. We acknowledge that it has been a difficult year. Yet I find hope and inspiration from how we, as individuals and organizations, have innovated and collaborated to confront COVID-19 and reimagine our future. So as we move forward with cautious optimism, we want to pause to reflect on what we've learned and also how we can best prepare for what's ahead. Today, we are delighted to have NBA champion and Golden State Warriors head coach Steve Kerr share some of the challenges he has faced while leading a high-performing team during the turbulent times our nation has been facing. We'll also discuss what he's learned from the challenges we've endured. Steve, you've led one of the NBA's most dominant franchises. What is your philosophy on building and maintaining elite teams and helping them through difficult times?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Dean Miner. It's great to be here with you. I've been very blessed as coach of the Warriors, just with the amount of talent that we've had. And throughout my playing career, I was on a lot of teams with a lot of talent. But what I found was that what really separated the good teams from the great teams, or the good teams from the poor teams, was the culture, the atmosphere that the players feel every single day when they enter the gym, when they come to the practice facility. And so I think it's really largely up to the coaching staff to establish what that culture is going to mean. And I think there has to be some values attached to that. But it doesn't mean anything unless it's authentic and real. And so what I found is we've had a really authentic culture here because I've tried to instill that, but the players are so invested in it. And when it's authentic and real and everybody feels it every single day, it becomes powerful. Now the trick is how you get to that point, and that's, I think, what coaching and leading is all about.
Great. It really resonates with me, your emphasis on an authentic culture. And of course, that begins with us as leaders. And I was wondering, for you as a leader, what have you learned during the pandemic that will stay with you during the rest of your career?
Well, I think it's really important to maintain your values and your moral code, whatever it is that sort of guides you. It's especially important in times of crisis. So for me as a coach, I really sort of base my coaching philosophy on four values. And my values are competitiveness, mindfulness, compassion, and joy. And so I think about those values every single day, and I try to help create the atmosphere that embodies all those values in our practice facility. And what's happened over the last year and a half, Lloyd, is that the pandemic came pretty much at the same time as our talent changed, and we lost players to retirement and had devastating injuries. So last season, we went from having been to the finals 5 straight years to having the worst record in the league. And it was crucial to me that we maintained our dignity and our values and our work ethic. So all those things that I talked about, we tried to enhance every single day. Talking about competition, we compete every day. We keep score. We make sure there's winners or losers, and everybody's feeling that, that vibe. There's got to be joy in the gym. All these guys played basketball from a young age because they loved it. That has to continue. But we have to coach with compassion and understand the difficulties of whether it's a season like we had last year where everything goes wrong, or the pandemic hits and the world seems to be going sideways. Important for us as leaders to be compassionate to people, understand what they're going through. And if we can teach a mindfulness, which is probably the biggest challenge of all, I think, in modern life, we can sort of put all that together and teach our players perspective and how to perform under pressure with kind of a clear mindset and an ability to maybe eliminate distraction. And, to get back to the original question, I mean, the pandemic has been just this incredible, just awful, dynamic, adverse effect on everyone's lives, no matter who you are or where you live. And so it's up to us in our own small community with the people we love, the people we work with, to try to guide them through that. And I think, as I said, sticking with your values is the best way to do that.
Those are very meaningful remarks, and I think ones that we can readily translate in our lives, no matter what profession or what activities we're engaged in life. Across the sports world, some athletes have been vaccine hesitant. What do you think's at the root of this?
I think it's a combination of the era of disinformation that we're living in, that we've really felt, particularly over the last few years in a political sense. I think it's bled right into the pandemic. So you got a lot of people who have been misled and misinformed. I think there's also a cultural effect. I think many of the African American players in professional sports have expressed a reluctance, and that comes because of the racial disparity and the racism that has existed in the United States for hundreds of years. So you've got generations of Black families that have felt, understandably, skeptical about medicine. Some of the historical events that have happened have put Black people in a very difficult position and an awful position when it comes to experimentation, medical practices. So I think there's a natural wariness among many of the African American players.
We've been very concerned about our faculty, staff, and students' mental and physical health throughout the pandemic, and we've made various forms of outreach and support available to them. How has the Warriors organization helped support the mental and physical well-being of players and staff through these challenging times?
Well, we've done a couple of things, Dean. We've tried to provide as many resources for the players as possible. So we do have mental health well-being specialists who the players have access to, so that they can go to them without any knowledge of us as a coaching staff or organizationally, so that the players can share their private thoughts or any needs that they have, and understand that they have full secrecy. But we've also tried to provide that, through our coaches and our management in the case of really individualized attention, making sure we're really paying attention to our players and communicating with them, asking them how they're doing. I have just found there's just less joy in general this year, in every aspect of life. And so I see it sometimes in the eyes of my players, and I'll see it during a scrimmage or a practice or even a game where there's just sort of this blank look on their faces. And when I see that, I just ask them how they're doing and ask them what's happening in their lives and try to check in with them, because I think just providing that conversation and an outlet for some of the frustration is helpful.
That really resonates with me. I think for all of us in high-performing organizations, by far our most valuable resources are people. And Steve, you've embodied that in your leadership, just as you mentioned, and even before COVID, in terms of your emphasis on the well-being of the individuals as well as of the individuals as competitive athletes. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are core values here at Stanford Medicine. And Steve, you've been a strong spokesperson on social justice issues, as we've already heard from you today, and especially during this particularly painful year. Does that come from your family upbringing, your sports involvement, your faith, or something else?
I think it comes from my upbringing. I grew up in a very academic family. My dad was a professor at UCLA. My mom also an educator, and so we were always. I have three siblings, and so the four of us were always listening to what was happening around the world, at the dinner table. We also traveled quite a bit. My dad took several sabbaticals, and so we lived in the Middle East. We lived in Cairo, Egypt. We lived in Beirut, Lebanon. We lived in France for a year. And I think that was probably the best education that I ever received, was just seeing the world at a young age, and seeing how different cultures operate, seeing different people around the world, understanding how fortunate we are as Americans, and how fortunate I was to be raised in a really great family that was providing me all this love and support. So I think just all that led to just a more global perspective, and an understanding that there's a lot of people suffering out there, and that it's important for all of us to try to chip in and help.
When did you decide you'd be a professional athlete? And I'm curious, you're recognized in athletics and indeed broadly in society as a truly inspired and inspirational leader. How did you develop your leadership skills and abilities?
I don't really know. I just I think I was really lucky, as I mentioned, to be raised in a family that supported me, and the whole family is really academically minded. In fact, I have a brother who has a PhD from Stanford in economics, and so I was the athlete, and I had the full support of my parents, and so they really encouraged me to do the things I love. They made sure I was doing my homework, but they really supported me, and I think I learned a lot from my dad and my mom and family. And then I just had incredible coaches along my path. I didn't expect to play in the NBA. I played at the University of Arizona for Lloyd Olson, Hall of Fame legendary coach, and then when I did make the NBA, which was kind of a surprise when it happened, I continued to run into these incredible coaches: Lenny Wilkins, Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson, all these Hall of Fame coaches. So I've had an amazing apprenticeship to try to prepare me for being a coach.
Wonderful. At Stanford Medicine, we maintain a focus on predicting and preventing disease before it starts through science, as well as adopting a healthy lifestyle. I understand you urge your players to take time for themselves and the things that they care about outside of the game. What are some of your own personal health habits, and how can you share with our Health Matters audience what you recommend and what you found to be effective, and how do you help your players think more about health holistically?
Yeah, so I think what I have realized over the years is if you love to do something and you go do it, there's an incredible benefit to your well-being. And sometimes in our society we glorify people who are workaholics, and if somebody's in a high pressure job and they're seeing out hiking or playing golf or something, they can actually be criticized. Why isn't that person in the office? I think that's insane. I think the key to being really good in your profession is to be well-rounded and to find the things you love, because you have to nourish yourself. You have to fill up your own cup every single day to have the energy to lead others and to inspire and to try to learn as you go, because we're all learning throughout our lives. So for me, I have found that there are several things that I like to do on the side that kind of really give me more energy to coach. I love to hike with my wife and our dog. We hike all the time and around the Bay Area. We're lucky. We've got these amazing trails. I like to play golf. If I can get out on the golf course, once every couple of weeks, it just makes me so happy. And the two hobbies I have at home, I like to cook. I find when I'm cooking a meal, it puts me in a really good place. I really enjoy the process, and it's something that I value. And then reading a good book. I'm not always doing it, and I find when I'm in a good book, I have some peace of mind. And sometimes I'll finish a book and won't pick one up for a week or two, and I'll notice I'm not as relaxed. So I think it's always great to have something to read. So those are my things. Everybody has their own personal hobbies and lives and things that they love to do, and I try to encourage all of our players to find whatever those things are in their own lives.
Wonderful. What did you learn from the NBA bubble that could be applicable to society as a whole?
Well, I think we as a team we weren't in the bubble, but because there were 8 teams that didn't go, but the league did an amazing job of keeping the league afloat last year, and I'm really proud of what the league accomplished by putting that bubble together. And so while I wasn't there experiencing what all those players and coaches were experiencing, I was definitely thankful that they were there, keeping the league going. I think what I learned is that if an organization and a group of people put their minds to it and really delve into something in times of crisis, they can pull something like this off. I mean, it was really a remarkable achievement for several months to put a group of players, coaches, and management under one umbrella, test them every day, have games going every day, continue the season, complete the season, crown a champion, all while this was going on. Just amazing. So our leadership in the NBA is phenomenal, and that's what I learned. That powerful leadership and buy-in from a group is really important.
Steve, you've spoken today and in the past about the importance of developing culture and a strong sense of organizational identity and DNA. Here at Stanford Medicine, we strive to create a culture of not only curiosity, care, and innovation, but also a culture of acceptance and inclusive leadership. How do you encourage your players and staff to live your organizational ideals and to inspire their teammates and colleagues to do so as well?
Well, I think it's a great question because it's really sort of the key to any leadership position when you're trying to inspire a group of people. It's easy to have values or write slogans on the wall, but if those things don't come to life, then they don't mean anything. And so it's really, I think, a combination of things. For me as a coach, I mentioned, joy is one of our core values. We try to infuse our practices and our game days with joy, whether that means celebrating a player's accomplishment, celebrating the birth of a child, and somebody with a family or someone with a team, building a family. A birthday celebration, something funny, a lot of humor, whether it's something in our film session, just to make everybody laugh. So whatever your values are, you have to practice them every day. And I think the other key, Lloyd, is you have to hire people who embody those values too. I mean, Steph Curry, there's never been a player in the NBA or in any professional sport in my mind who embodies joy more than Steph Curry. And so if joy is one of my values and I've got Steph Curry on my team, it's pretty easy to really make the team feel that joy every single day. And I think, you can expand on that and go into your other values and figure out, how are we making them all come alive? But that's the trick. And that's also kind of the fun of being in a position of leadership where you get to determine what is being emphasized every single day.
With restrictions being lifted and many activities resuming, how will the Warriors organization manage public health and safety concerns and adjust player and staff policies as we start to reemerge?
Well, we are under the NBA guidelines, and so we're just following the league guidelines, but we're also trying to encourage everybody in our community to continue to be safe and smart. So, most of our players were vaccinated probably 6 weeks ago. with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We did a couple of PSAs, showing our players being vaccinated. We continue to wear masks, on the plane. We continue to wear masks on the sidelines, in our team meetings. These are all things that we have learned, and we've tried to just learn from the experts and follow the guidelines. And we all know that if we can do that, we're going to have a better and quicker resolution to all of this. So we're just trying to be good soldiers and listen to the people who know what they're talking about.
Steve, one last question for you. Many people rediscovered interest during the time spent in lockdown. Was this the case for you? And what do you most look forward to doing once we emerge from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think what happened in our family, and I think it happened in a lot of families, was we all sort of hunkered down, in the family home, and so we have, my wife and I have 3 kids. They all have significant others. So there were 8 of us under the roof, and we were in full lockdown. We weren't leaving the house. We were together every day, and we're very fortunate to have enough space in our house to enjoy each other without crowding each other, and took turns cooking, and we had jigsaw puzzles on the dining room table, and I read a ton of books while it was happening. I tried to brush up on some of the things that I need to continue to get better with as far as coaching. I did a lot of Zooms, particularly with the issues of racial injustice that have been so prominent in our country, and so in the end, I kept very busy, but it was a complete change in routine. But it was it wasn't bad because I got to spend a lot of time with family.
Great. Steve, thank you for spending time with me and our audience today. Your commitment to service and civic responsibility are remarkable and an inspiration to all of us. We're grateful for your participation at Health Matters and for your leadership on and off the court. And to everyone joining us here today, thank you. Your health and that of our entire community matters to all of us here at Stanford Medicine. Please carve out more time for yourself this week to explore the range of health offerings that are available on the Health Matters site. Thank you and be well.